You are listening to a Roamcast with Neil Kramer.
What did you say your name was again?
I didn't.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
I have a bit of a cold, actually, and I was kind of waiting till my voice returned to normal, but that's just not happening in the timescale that I thought it would. So I'm going to record this anyway, try and clear my throat and nose and voice and everything, and I'm sure you won't mind. It's real, sincere, so let's just do it. I love winter. I admire its bleakness, even in the bitter days of January, when the grey rains fall forever and the bloody ruthless wind cracks my bones. There is still something sanctified in the austerity. It's always very green here, still. Sometimes luscious, sometimes ethereal. The beautiful trees. I can hear one of them now. Its wood creaking in the wind. You might be able to hear it squeak. The Douglas firs, the Sitka spruces, the western red cedars and hemlocks. And wider around, the ocean. The ocean at this time of year is like a black emerald. It swells and surges and booms, and then, later, when things calm, and the sky opens, the water is hushed and tranquil, and it looks to me like giant fields of mercury. And I can sit and watch it all for a long time. watch the herons and the cormorants and the eagles cruise these glacial plains, and then land upon some branch or post or rock where they wait and watch. And throughout the year, every day, deer are present. They walk through my garden every single day, and I love them. And though, as I have mentioned before, they eat our flowers and nibble all manner of green succulent things, we do not care in the Kramer household. We are not exhibiting champion tulips at Washington flower shows, so we don't mind. And in winter, the deer seem to be here even more often as they sort of adapt their grazing habits to accommodate the colder landscape. They know this place is safe. They know they can eat here every day. And they've become accustomed to us. They don't run away when we are close, unless we make very sudden movements or make loud noises. And so too I see more raccoons and coyotes. I see more owls and foxes. The bears have mostly now gone into hibernation, where they will remain in their hidden dens for months on end, and where of course their clever bodies will slow down to preserve every ounce of energy. And there they sleep and dream, though I never see them. Most constant and abiding of all, the mountains, punctuating the horizon with a very pristine and noble majesty. And they are clothed in sparkling snow at the moment, blue in the morning, pink in the evening, when the sun shines. And to my endless delight, I get to see many great peaks on my walks around here. Baker, Rainier, Walker, Deception, Olympus, and all cradled in the immense tapestry of the forests. And as you probably know by now, if you've been listening for a little while, that from time to time I love to go deep into the forests, far away, where there is nothing except me and the land. Millions of acres of it, big enough to die in, alone, undiscovered, anonymous, free. My life becomes part of the life of the forest, is all. Everything I have ever thought or felt, everything I've done, every one I've ever known. And though the land appears impartial and incurious, it sees deeper than one might imagine. And as this wind keeps gently rising around me, I'm reminded that the Earth realm pattern, based on the original paradise, is good. And it too will disappear in time. It is not what it appears to be. It is not ours. The dream is unmade, then all things are made new. But for now, for today, it is here, and it certainly has purpose. Its substance is real enough to divulge the teachings of free will quite amply. Substantial enough to draw blood and wonder in equal measure. The omniscient word woven into all. Can you see it? Can you hear it? To think and feel spiritually, you will be compelled to examine the nature of self, of reality, of being, of existence. It becomes necessary to look into the essence of things, every day, everywhere. So we can quite confidently say that genuine spiritual philosophy is always inherently metaphysical in nature. It has theological elements too, of course, that simply being the study of divinity, of religious history and practice, of experiential faith. Spiritual philosophy encompasses epistemology and ontology, the study of knowledge and its foundations, and the study of becoming and existence, respectively. And I would certainly say aesthetics plays an imperative role in the life of the mature spiritual aspirant. Aesthetics in the sense of developing a deep rapport with beauty. To see it in pictures and words, to hear it in music and voices, to note its subtle presence in bits of broken pavement and days of loneliness, following the rays to the heavenly host. What a strange kind of work it is to think about these things. There really is no career path for it. One has to carve and chisel this out of the marble block. Find a way or make one. So I sometimes am described as a philosopher by others and myself. Not sure what else to call it. What to call this work. A metaphysician sounds a bit flowery, doesn't it? Mystic sounds too ostentatious. Teacher is not bad, because that is what I do, teaching as an educator, which is something I've done throughout my life in various capacities. The philosophy I practice is very applied. It's not just the abstract academic study of what dead Germans and Greeks said a long time ago. To me, that is rather a dull business. I think that the real life of a philosopher is to seize the vitality and the veracity of one's own existence. An old spiritual adage that. To intone one's purpose and language and grief and vision and love. It's very personal. And it's very universal. It requires courage and the unsleeping sentinel perspective. And this is a very physical philosophy. A spiritual life is as arduous as it is enjoyable. The depth, the piercing, the remembrance. So much to distinguish and absorb. 1,000 disciplines, practices, proposals, investigations, dimensions, observances. Never any clear division between work, play, contemplation. They are threads that weave a single cloth. Time is important. This is often the simple thing that differentiates the novice from the connoisseur. Time. Time is needed to hone one's craft. Time to consider. Time to season. Time to feel. And honestly, however much time one has, it eventually becomes apparent that there is not enough time. Even if one were to live 150 years. Not enough time to fully grasp all the essential principles of sacred knowledge. Not enough time. Cannot be done in a single life. Yet perhaps one life is all we have. Very popular, isn't it, to accept reincarnation as a done deal, a soul voyaging through multiple selves over many lives. But there is the very distinct potentiality that there is only one life, this one. This is all you have. It is healthy and instructive, I believe, to behave as if this single lifetime is all we have. This one prodigious, phenomenal lightning strike of existence in the mortal flesh. All the astonishment and suffering, all the dread and joy, all those teachings in the consequences of one's will. How we perceive, how we conceive, how we transmute, or not. So brief. Arrive, reflect, depart. Where to? Depends on how you lived. The astute spiritual aspirant also comes to realize that being too industrious, too analytical, too rich in information may serve to impede the flow of wisdom. Because wisdom does not primarily arise from the acquisition of knowledge. Wisdom is not merely information marinated in a cooking pot for 50 years. It arises from an inner silence into which emanates knowing. It is a knowing from elsewhere, a higher connection available only to the self free from personal agenda or egoic burden. A mind and heart unyoked from the collusions of repressed terror and longing. In this way, self-purification becomes the most important task for the ardent spiritual human. A certain threshold, once again that word, threshold, must be attained. A threshold of clarity, purity, cleanness, mental and emotional cleanliness. A state where the shocking pains of youth are reborn in wisdom. No longer sort of covertly deterring the mature mind from engaging full on with life. How long this process takes depends on the devotion and the expertise of the individual, and on the degree of high quality fellowship they cultivate around them. It is a much more fruitful journey in the occasional company of other men and women who share a sincere spiritual trajectory with great levels of accomplished embodiment. And there is a proper pace to all this stuff. Too quickly, too much, and the spiritual deepening is hampered. It is constricted by the pretentious revolutions of the performing mind. Too slowly, too little, and one begins to stultify and stagnate. So the pilgrim simply says to himself, one thing at a time, in the proper way. I seek to know reality in the best way I can. My devotion and my transformation are my dearest allies. The unbounded, nebulous mystery of life will come to me as it will. I move toward its centre with the proper manner, measure, and momentum. I will seek counsel when it's time. I will wander in solitude when that is right. Every step matters. It becomes clear in the fullness of time that a lesson plan is set before us each morning when we wake up. It is expressed, this lesson plan, in everything that we encounter. Our home, our work, our relationships, challenges of insight, growth and empathy, whispers of higher visions, translocations, transmutations. The sentient world sets before you every day a sequence of lessons in how to become a better person. Sometimes there might be great enterprise and adventure, thrusting into the unknown. And sometimes there is melancholy and hollowness. This too is part of the lesson plan. So many things, so many moments. So I seek to distill wherever and whenever possible, to boil things down, to purify, so as simply to arrive at the quintessence of a thing as best I can. People often ask me, well, what do you do, Neil? What practices and principles do you enact every day? How do you avoid New Age gibberish? What is the real material, the real work, the real words and practices and thoughts and images? Seriously? Is the proper practice found in rising early, in breathing, in dream work, in yoga, in writing, in speaking, in meditation, in prayer? What? What is it? Is it in the possession of esoteric knowledge, a broad education in parapolitical history, in sciences, in the arts? Is it in abstinence from all the vices of flesh and inebriation? Is it just okay to wander in nature hither and thither with our binoculars and notepad and our flask of tea? Thoughtless, all thoughts stuffed, wistful or elated or blank? Should we be pursuing or expecting extraordinary downloads from magical beings? What about a sacred lineage that is bestowed upon us by some special master figure? Should we sit before a channel and receive the mystical dictums of a disembodied entity? Should we go to India, or China, or Japan, or Tibet, or England, or Ireland, or Egypt, or Peru, or what? Is there something precious in those places? Or are they all wild goose chases? How do you decide where to look and what to act upon? What to spend your fleeting, flickering flame of life on? Well, I can tell you my approach, happily. I can tell you how I do it, by way of a question and an answer. And I have worded this old spiritual formula in my own particular way. And I have found it to be one of the simplest, most elegant, and most useful spiritual precepts there is. And it goes like this: what pleases God? That we love, that we are humble, and that we seek the truth with all our heart. Three unpretentious, plain things: love, humbleness, truth. They are all that is required to live well, to fulfill oneself and to serve the world well, to live in a way that deepens our walk with God. And if you don't like the word God, you can swap it out for divinity or source or nature or some such. But you really should never worry about that word, because when we use it in its greatest, fullest sense. No institutionalized religion owns that word. It is our word. to love, to be humble, to seek the truth with all our heart. So through the observance of this quite unembellished triad of daily practice, we can bring about changes in ourselves that lead to a greater understanding of reality. We create a better life. And crucially, through this practice, we help to determine what occurs to us when we die. Without these three things, without love, without humbleness, without truth, it seems to me that the gift of life is somewhat given away, renounced even. Can these simple things be the difference between mortal oblivion and spiritual eternity? To save oneself through unadorned, soulful living, and thereby slowly bring oneself into the pattern of godliness. No secret jump-ahead formula, no magic potions, just honest, deep work every day. Many people have no interest whatsoever in loving, in humbleness and in truth. They can be seen, instead, pouring their time and energy into pursuing comfort and security and entertainment. Whether rich or poor, educated or uneducated, it really makes little difference. And whether a pack of cigarettes comforts somebody, or 5 houses and 2 yachts, there is no distinction in terms of denial of purpose. To live without inner awareness and higher providence is tantamount to soul oblivion. So this spiritual formula, to love, to be humble, to seek the truth with all one's heart, constitutes what is called uprightness, spoken of often in various ways in spiritual literature as upright in heart, upright conduct, standing upright, paths of uprightness. It's not just some vague moral daydream. It is solid, demonstrable spiritual practice. Consider the esoteric wisdom from Psalm 84, verse 11. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk uprightly. Little footnote here. Mostly, when you hear me use the word esoteric, you can substitute it with the word real, because that is what is mostly implied. Esoteric Christianity is real Christianity. Esoteric knowledge is real knowledge. Western esotericism is Western realism in spiritual understanding. The esoteric view is the real, accurate, natural view of a truthful human. Uprightness. Of course, if we look carefully at gross imitations of a spiritual life, people who ornament their lives with spiritual paraphernalia, both materially and immaterially, you will see that uprightness is paid much lip service, both with the devout churchgoer and the more individualistic alternative explorer. Doesn't matter, both of them do it. They say a nice thing, but often do an appalling thing, whether hidden or blatant. Most people, I have to say, have a poor or even dreadful relationship with love, humbleness and truth. They really do not practice these things in any way. In fact, they dishonour themselves by their childish pretending of these things. It is increasingly my experience that real spiritual practice is always rather uncompromising and resolute. It is serious and demanding. No puffiness, no flim-flam, no daydreaming, no we're all the same poppycock. no drive towards inoffensiveness, no fear of hate, no fear of morality, no backdoor democratically themed communism, no worry of contradicting the degenerate liberalism of mainstream culture. We know these things are wrong. They are set against spirit. To live truthfully, one first has to rid oneself of illusions. I'd say illusions are the biggest obstacle to discerning the real from the unreal. And though this cleansing takes a long time, the process can be enhanced by applying the spiritual practices of love, humbleness, and truth. What does this really mean? How do we do it? How are we to properly define and elucidate these things? Let us take a closer look. Love is commonly considered as a strong affection between people. Family, friends, romance. It may be platonic, it may be sensual, it could be idealistic, it could even be a rather abstract love. Love of a bridge, love of a colour, love of an idea. Many forms. And in everyday life, for the ordinary man and woman, they imagine that they love often. They say, I love him, I love her, I love this, I love you. These things they say. They fancy there is lots of love in their life. But if you look very carefully, you see big problems between what they say and what they do. Most people struggle to know what love is. They are confused and even suspicious of its nature. They sense it is a blessed thing, but also something with a fiery nature, quite true. A fire that can be destructive. So without fully conceiving of love in this respect, its presence within oneself, where it comes from, how to give it, how to receive it, cannot really be known. People cannot harness the light of love, inside or out. They close their energetic aperture. I think that most people use the word love in place of the word care. To me, love is much more than that. At its heart, love is communion. Communion as a condition of profound accord. 3 into 1. A man, a woman, spirit. Deep, vivid, holy union. A coalescence of apparently separate forms into their true single form, rising, falling, coming together, then withdrawing, then coming together again with ever more honesty and completion. A waltz, a ballet of supernal intimacy that is natural. Sadly, though, this inborn skill becomes strangely misplaced in many people around the age of 7 or 8, lost, and often does not return. The power to commune riven from life. For the few, for those who wish to know reality, they will come back to the remembrance of their childish entreaty of love and begin the gradual developmental journey to find its adult expression and meaning, a new fullness, a new intensity, a new wonder. They will pursue its expression through the illuminated body as a gift of intimacy with life itself. It is one of the most precious jewels of a spiritual life. The essence of love is most effectively taught in relationship between humans. What it is, how to do it, the sorrow, the joy, made, unmade. The love grows, and it can be turned outward toward anyone and anything as one pleases. Stars, music, a country, courage, redemption, divinity. Let us say then that the communion of love is a transcendent, consecrating, unifying art. The more spiritual understanding a person has, the deeper they can love. From infancy to elderhood, the evolution of love in one's life marks their applied understanding of the providential world. The nature of life is fire. The nature of divinity on earth is light. The gentle embers and the voracious flames transmute everything they set their light upon. To nourish, to know, to destroy, to purify, to heal, to elevate, to honour. A spiritual life demands an embodiment of this fire. This is love. Humbleness. Humbleness in its simplest form is not being selfish, not being self-important or conceited. It is to not live in an egotistical way, either privately or publicly. We understand that. To practice humbleness in a spiritual manner is to not accept a life where one's unconscious fears and desires rule every day. To refuse to treat life merely as a sequence of things and events that either advantage or disadvantage oneself. Humbleness is to comport oneself with propriety, courtesy, reverence, gratitude. To be humble before God is to recognize that your life is not all about your pleasure and comfort. It is to realize, at the inner level, that your life is not really about you at all. It certainly begins with a quest to understand one's own nature. But it ought to move then to a realization that there is a providential power in the world, initially quite outside and separate from oneself. Not some mythological abstraction of mind, not some buried psychological daydream, but something quite real, quite concrete, quite striking in its authority. And perhaps, just maybe, the origin and substance of this force is divine, a sublime and dignified ordinance that embraces a complete understanding of our own secret inner world, and the reciprocal expression of that on the outside. Or, to put it plainly, God knows who you are, what you are doing, and how best you can grow. He knows what we desire and fear, how best we can walk upon a path that benefits ourselves, and how we can become an asset to this world and the next. Illumination in our footsteps. No more, no less. To leave an imprint of goodness wherever we go. To walk uprightly. Humbleness and divinity are, therefore, closely bonded. Now let us bring the study of humbleness to a supremely practical level. Humility is a word closely related to humbleness, of course. Humility in having a modest view of one's own importance. To place one's own importance properly in the overall measure of things. That is a complex and skilled act. To consider oneself as lowly and insignificant is quite wrong. To consider oneself as a direct emanation of God, walking around on two legs and somehow central to the mystery of creation, is also quite wrong. To solve this problem, the spiritual aspirant takes it upon himself to undertake a most serious and solemn metaphysical practice. For 60 days, every time you come across a toilet that in any way is unclean, especially a public toilet in a cafe or airplane, clean it. Clean up the excretions of other inconsiderate people. The lid, the seat, the bowl, the floor, clean it. Take the extra time and use the toilet paper and soap and towels at hand and clean. Leave it astonishingly fresh and sanitary for the next person, even though you don't need to, even though the human waste you have cleared up is not yours. This practice helps to recalibrate one's image of oneself. It need not be carried through for the rest of life, except perhaps, of course, within one's own household, because once the lesson is learned, it is rarely forgotten. It is an exercise in presence, in sincerity, in humbleness. Sincerity is very important in life. If self is too insincere, too masked, too involved in fantasizing, then spirit cannot move through it very easily, if at all. So this is why we use the word purification over and over in this work. That is the removal and dissolution of misconception and misconduct. To teach ourselves simply to think, feel, and act truthfully. To choose the proper moments to act with tact and delicacy, and moments when to act with passion and force. To intuit the proper balance and timing requires practice and devotion to embody this art. Humbleness also encompasses a necessity for meticulous honesty in how we deal with negative feelings. I think many people understand and appreciate the significance of allowing feelings of major anguish to fully arise within oneself, to really let go and weep, to yield utterly to the sorrow. I think astute aspirants understand this. But what about the more melancholic feelings? Should we no longer have times where futility, pointlessness, and listlessness arise within us? Where we look out of the rainy window and wonder at the point of it all? Should we have eliminated, erased these unseemly things by now? Is it weak, or wrong, or shameful to feel like this? No, it is most certainly not. I think it is perfectly normal for sensitive, loving humans to become saddened by the ingrained disharmony in the world, the loss, the void, the loneliness, the exhaustion. We become weary, world weary. Sometimes this means we haven't got the strength to care. we lie around in apathy. We put things off because we can't be bothered. Futility. Lethargy. I often feel these things, and I am done feeling bad about them. They arise, and they evaporate. It is the fatigued self, nothing more. So now, when a deep ambivalence overcomes me, I acknowledge it. I do not try to shake it off or explain it or divert it somehow. I recognize that the world is broken. I am sensitive. And so it is natural for me to respond in these ways. This also is a practice in humbleness. Not to dream, not to pretend, to admit my flawed nature, and to acknowledge when I am tired of the world. It is nothing to be worried about. Honesty and humbleness close together. To seek the truth with all your heart. This is so clear, ingenious in safeguarding integrity. What I mean by that is, it is the supreme equality of life, that we are each extended an invitation to know truth. To know truth is to know reality. That is all. Truth is reality. And someone might say, well, I know reality. Here I am, in the world. I've travelled around. I've lived a lot of life, indeed. I would say generally I know what's what. So if you're saying that knowing truth is knowing reality, then I know a lot of truth. This is what a regular guy might say. In one corner of my garage lives a little spider. And the garage, with its shelves and cars and garden tools and old paint cans and boxes and bits and pieces, is the spider's main experience of reality. And a few times, I expect, he has ventured outside a bit, the little spider, and explored the surrounding flowers and bushes and concrete and drain pipes and windowsills and eaves. And then he came back inside. So that total area, let's say 500 square feet, is his total experience of reality. From the spider's perspective, it is filled with wonders, more than sufficiently varied in its tones and textures and objects and experiences. It is a big reality. To me, a man, it seems a small world. I would not enjoy so much, I think, living my life in the garage. There is so much more that will help to season me in the wider provinces of life. What about travel? Does travel broaden the mind? Depends on the mind. I know one lady who travelled to more countries than anyone else I have ever known. Maybe 50 or 70 countries across Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, everywhere. Every major country you can think of, and tons of weird little ones that you didn't even know existed, probably, let alone be aware of their culture and history. Truly far and wide this woman travelled. Airplanes and yachts and cruise ships and cars and trains and motorbikes and bicycles and trams and ferries and putt-putts. Walking, talking, dining, visiting, touring, photographing. And from all this she learned Nothing. Zip. Nout. I think almost by her own confession, it was all no noticeable enhancement to her experience of reality. Her travels did not do very much for her at all. Why? How could this be? Is she especially half-witted, this poor woman? No, she was not. How, then, could all this colourful motion through life be to no avail? Because she moved only within the reality bubble of her own perceptions. She transported that bubble around with her. She herself suspended in the middle of it. And the only things that were allowed in or out were things that fit into her existing and fixed idea of how things are. The light aperture practically closed. 1 out of 7. Her entire catalogue of world trekking might as well have just been some kind of virtual reality game right from the comfort of her living room. The photographs I occasionally saw did indeed give that vague impression. So for her, despite the millions of miles travelled, nothing challenged. No adaptations, nothing destroyed, nothing created. Only blurred, moving decorations. Future tales of memorable dinners and eccentric characters, and that's about it. The spider knows more about reality than she. Again, I ask you to recognize that to know truth, to know reality, is a choice. To not know truth, to not know reality, is a choice. It is not my business what choice someone else makes. It really isn't. That's up to them. I can only know what I choose. I choose to bake wisdom into every day of my life, imperfectly, blemished in execution, but very honest and getting better. To become better is a practice of faith. Firstly, to cultivate faith in oneself, faith as seeing, faith as knowing, expressing, empirical. Then, faith in providence, the movement of spirit through the whole of life, the interconnectedness of everything, the mirroring of micro and macro, above and below. And this leads inevitably to a faith in the mysterious origin of the providential design and its purpose, which leads to divinity, to source, to the big G upstairs. This is faith in spirit, real. Many people have a spiritual feeling, and some indeed set themselves in motion in spiritual exploration, but very few have a spiritual path. Most have nothing at all, of course. Seeking the truth with all your heart is a black and white thing. It is absolute. Because you're either doing it or you're not. The light is on or off. You can't sort of do it. You can't do it a bit here and a bit there. You have to do it through the sum of your days. It needs consistent and repeated experiential encounter. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, whether you're sweeping the yard or sat in a cafe or taking care of family and home, driving a truck, in school, mowing the lawn, whatever. At all times, you have in front of you everything necessary to develop and apply your spiritual understanding. At all times, in every hour of your life, if you wish. Let me be crystal clear about this. The purest, deepest, life-changing spiritual wisdom, emanating direct from the divine, is available to everyone at all times in equal measure. Should the individual choose to prepare their vessel of being to receive such wisdom, you must make the deep inner vow to stay here, to willfully choose to be here in this world and remain until the end, to give your life, to dwell intentionally here and not to fantasize about escaping. Be here and make it good. Make it worthwhile. Truthful discovery requires powers of discrimination, scholarliness, and instinct. All of them. No one is born with these skills fully developed. They have to be crafted. You have to work to sharpen them. If you are serious about communication, and I can't see how a lover of truth cannot be, then the more highly skilled you become in reading, writing, and speaking, the better. Real wisdom comes primarily from one's own personal revelation. You have to figure stuff out for yourself. What is honest? What is quality? What is dishonest? What is rubbish? Become equipped within yourself to sort the pure, the substantial, and the sound from the tainted, the fickle, and the specious. You cannot expect other people to do this sort of work for you. Some other person cannot tell you how things are. They cannot do the detective work on your behalf. There are no summarized reports on the state of reality coming your way anytime soon. This cannot happen by design. You have to find the joy of solving mysteries within yourself. You do it. People will sometimes say, well, they don't have the time for this sort of thing. Why not? What else did they choose to do in life that means they cannot seek the truth with all their heart? Did they have something that was more compelling? Did they make a mistake? Perhaps they couldn't be bothered. If you devote your life to knowing truth, there is not one single transcendental treasure at the end of a long road. It is constant jewels along the path throughout life. Every day, indeed, if you look carefully. Constantly rewarding, satisfying, elevating, all the time. And sometimes these jewels are visible and tangible. It is obvious when we've come across one. And sometimes they are quite invisible. Instead, these rubies and emeralds and sapphires are more like hidden seeds germinating below ground, unseen for a long time. But they are there nonetheless. And something wonderful is happening below the surface. Once you attain a certain threshold of truthful discovery, by virtue of your own God-given ingenuity and personal resolve, you see that you are not entirely alone in your search for truth. Firstly, when your skills are sharp, and when your unconscious fears and desires have been brought into the light and dissolved well enough, the witness of the inner spirit comes to you. Holy in its nature and purpose. It will aid in your sense of distinguishing good from bad, right from wrong. No pluralism, no relativism, black and white. And this Holy Spirit will move into you in accordance with your capacity to host it. If you are contaminated with much unconscious turmoil and much neurosis, you will not be able to hold it, nor receive its signal, nor know its message. If you are clear, through the purification of your inner work, then you will be able to welcome it into your light field and accept its gifts of gnosis. It is all around us all the time, this spirit, this loving teacher and protector, this perfect guide. We just can't normally see it through the fog of our own ignorance. Secondly, to help us on our search for truth, there is the witness of fellowship. When we share our honest life with other high-caliber men and women, when we are inspired and held and known and seen by our brothers and sisters in spirit, we bring about the witness of fellowship. These trusted friends help us to identify falsehood and rejoice in truth. Their expertise, their inspiration, and their solid track record of insight enormously helps us to improve. And it makes life a whole lot easier and more enjoyable. To nurture and enrich each other in love and respect and friendship. Often enduring after many blood ties come undone. It is beyond flesh. The witness of fellowship is truly transcendental because it supports a movement toward the divine. Now, we appreciate the wider dimension to what it means to seek truth with all your heart. And overall now, we can say that the devotion necessary to love, to be humble, to seek the truth, is no mean feat. It is a daily practice. It is a life's work. Contained within this simple formula is a life-changing key to wisdom. Many people pretend to themselves and to others that they are seeking truth, when really they are doing nothing of the sort. They fantasize that they are going far along a path of spiritual accomplishment, when in all honesty they are greedily engrossed in their own evasive dreams. And the falsehood of these illusions is instantly evident and totally unmistakable to any serious spiritual practitioner. Easy to see, if you know what spiritual embodiment looks like, which to me is fucking obvious. Easy to see. There are a handful of men and women in my life who embody an abundance of spiritual wisdom by virtue of their long years of earnest inner work, and without exception, every one of them can spot the spiritual fantasist a mile off. Mostly they view these childish daydreamers from a place of mature compassion, though sometimes, with the more grotesque delusions, they are just downright annoying. I know many good people who dwell in illusion. Sometimes they are illusions of quite a pleasant nature, and they may indeed have all the stylings of a philosophical and spiritual life. The words, the clothes, the books, tales, adventures, friends, practices. Yet they remain illusions nonetheless. And they certainly impede progress. And some might say that these daydreams are nothing more than temporary safe harbour for tender souls, fresh from battle with open wounds and a dire need to withdraw from the chaos of painful encounter. So they manufacture for themselves a fairy tale psychogenic fugue that approximates what they think they are looking for, Even though it is completely bogus, it seems to them better than nothing. Could nothing be better than any illusion? Are contrived dream bubbles treacherous snares that kill development and incarcerate people for a whole lifetime, consigning them to soul extinction at the end? Year in, year out, I continue to be flabbergasted by how fiercely insistent people are in their daydreams. How they choose to completely ignore the manifestly counterfeit nature of what and who they are witnessing. Sometimes they choose a figure, a holy prognosticator, and they will venerate this empty mannequin as a blank white screen onto which they will project their fantasies. And if the mannequin happens to speak of things that cater to their fantasies, then all the better. They then conspire together to cement and buttress the escapist illusion forevermore. I used to be pretty patient with this kind of thing. Now, today, less so. Because the truth is, whether someone is 25 or 75, there is no excuse for indulging in illusions. They just make things worse for everyone. Part of the reason the world is in such a pickle is because of people's delusions. Chosen, deliberate, repeated. Think of it like this. It is a form of self-harming to beguile oneself with New Age or religious fantasies. It is to select dysfunction as a self-destructive lifestyle choice. It does become a far more insidious kind of disinformation campaign perpetrated on oneself by oneself. And at this point, the forgivable sin of dysfunction slips into the unforgivable sin of willful depravity. And with such persistent distortions of truth, the first creeping haze of psychosis becomes perceptible. You can see it. You can smell it. So this is about as far from a heartfelt search for truth as you can get. And that's what so many human beings choose to do, fantasize themselves into dysfunction. To seek the truth, in principle, to the calculating intellect, sounds straightforward. In execution, to the insightful mind, it is difficult. It is a natural impulse, and it is a massive spiritual challenge. A long time ago, I asked a teacher of mine a question. I asked him, why do most Europeans stop developing their education, stop wanting to learn after they leave school or college? And my teacher said, because most people don't want to think about things. Because thinking about things leads to discomfort. It unravels things. It is often very disturbing, at least in the beginning. So, most people instead search for a very satisfying fantasy, and they live in that fantasy forever. It might be a fantasy about politics or religion or sport or a busy career. Productive or unproductive, whichever method of diversion is chosen, people live an unthinking life not because they are simple-minded, but because they are afraid. And so they will defend their unthinking methodology to the grave. And no amount of outside stimulation, irrefutable logic, inspiration or encouragement will make a blind bit of difference. All by themselves, They have to understand and accept the association of truth and pain. So that's what he said, something along those lines. These are good words. And when he spoke about thinking, of course, he meant it in a contemplative spiritual capacity. Insight, wisdom, rather than mere rumination and recollection. We have addressed this issue of the thinking and the unthinking many times in many different ways and using a variety of different terms. And every time we do so, I would hope, we see some new detail, some new texture or angle that illuminates matters further. It's not about division. Empire would love us to believe that if we consider lots of people to be unthinking, we are somehow committing an outrageous act of dehumanization. That's what you would read over at Psychology Today, where they continually infer that dehumanization is mostly associated with right-wing nationalism. And to call someone an animal or vermin or illegal is dehumanizing. What absolute rubbish. And they teach this in colleges all over the world, as you know, to our young people. Well, I myself certainly reserve the right to call someone an animal or vermin or illegal whenever I wish. Free speech, freedom of expression. If it upsets and disgruntles people, that's too bad. Because my freedom of expression is absolute. And it is also underpinned by this thing here we have in America, the Constitution. As if it ever needed to be, but thank God it is. There is no positive right to free speech in England. Did you know that? I can quite easily be locked up if they don't like what I'm saying. They do that in England all the time to people, quietly, brutally. I'm not joking. Same in most European, African and Asian countries. No lawful protected right to freedom of human expression. Just empty documents, empty treaties that are in no way legally binding or sound upon closer inspection. These countries, these places, they only want polite submission. This is not living. No such thing as borders is empire. No such thing as illegals is empire. No nations, no history, no heritage, no identity. Just one giant diversity wreckage. Nothing dehumanizing here. No such thing as dehumanization for the thinking person. It might offend people, what we say. Too bad. We don't want to try and outlaw people being upset. That is the mark of an uncivilized society. The decision to think or not think, to determine or to follow, to cultivate experiential faith or to blindly believe, to examine reality or to live in a bubble. The decision to aspire to wisdom or to cling to obliviousness. What can be misleading about this at first glance is that the unthinking may appear to be well qualified through their submission to various educational institutions of empire. Bachelors, masters, doctorates, various awards and certificates and titles, all being proffered as distinguished qualifications, of course. And these students may indeed become great psychologists and barristers and judges and senators and ministers and professors and surgeons and innovators and whatnot. Sure. You only need open up a page or screen of CNN or BBC or The Guardian or New York Times or The Washington Post or listen to NPR or Radio 4 and you will be immediately and violently injected with venomous fraudulence. They want to turn you against thinking. As a teenager, I sometimes used to watch the grown-up political TV shows. Things about society, war, science, culture, education, people. I hated the figures paraded out as the intelligentsia. Even before I knew exactly who and what these empire lackeys were, I felt their lack of truth, even as a child. I could tell they were fake. They had no wisdom. Only data points of empire stuffed into their heads. And yet they put forth these disgusting simulations of caring. They virtue-signalled fake social conscience. They pretended to care about local communities and the wider social body. But it was not true. And everyone, deep inside knew it. False culture, false science, false church, false government. All assuming the mantle of arbiters of reality. And that's what gets me. The sanctimony. The smug masquerade. What are the real characteristics of a grown-up? To think. To embody truth. To express and transmute sorrow. These things together, for me, mark out the wise elder and are a joy to behold. But as we have exhaustively examined over the years together, the greater part of humankind doesn't want to think, doesn't want to know truth, and doesn't want anything to do with sorrow. Those things are to be avoided. So the grown-ups in the world are grown-ups only in terms of their appearance. Inside, they are children, hiding. So we cannot say that the crude circus tricks of data recall and regurgitation taught in empire schools and colleges in any way equate to real education. We know that. Especially in terms of history, politics, religion, society, culture, literature, critical thinking, intellectual and artistic discrimination, stuff like that. Those things are turned upside down and inside out. They are unreal. A confidence trick, eroding, numbing. Yet, as in most of life, there are always glorious exceptions to every generality. I myself know half a dozen people who are currently in mainstream universities, and because of who these individuals are, the strength of their character, and the substantial insight they have cultivated, they will only enrich themselves by their time in those institutions. They know they will have to sift through a lot of mud to get to the specks of gold. They know they will have to exercise tremendous patience to accommodate the frequent immorality, despiritualization, and vile indoctrination found in the materials, the ideas, the lecturers, and the students. They know also, however, that they will learn much about the robot people, the NPCs, who are in themselves content to fill their minds with prefabricated notions of reality. Thoughts already prescribed and articulated for them by somebody else. They will learn about the education system of empire. They will see the indoctrination up close and personal. So, later in the life of our wonderful men and women, of deep love and humbleness and truth, they will come to hammer and demolish and grind these bad institutions into the ground. They are champions of humanity and servants of goodness. It is possible to find decent, conscious leadership in a school with sound tutors, principles, and honesty. It can be done. You can go to a solid engineering school, medical school, carpentry school, art school, music school, dental school, and whatever, and be trained in how to skill and equip yourself for a particular kind of work. A good beginning to your own craftsmanship. It can be done. I am 90% self-taught in my fields of work, in various disciplines. I enjoy learning. And whilst my abilities are imperfect, they are decent and they are improving little by little. Every time I pick up the guitar, I improve. Every time I think about a thing, I see and comprehend more. There is less disharmony, less pain with each passing year. But at first, the guitar hurt my fingers for a long time. and at first thinking hurt my heart for a long time. I chose to bear the hardship because I knew that other good men, whom I admired, had done it before me, and they went on to great wisdom and benevolence, and that inspires fortitude. And sometimes I realize I cannot get to something on my own. I don't know a thing. I walk into a dense mist of unknowing and I cannot see anything. So I seek out someone who can illuminate things in a way that I cannot. I know when to reach out. Finding the right person requires great discernment, great clarity, great honesty in oneself. Easy to dream about those people. Easy to put that garment on someone who doesn't deserve it. But I'm glad to say there have been some very special people in my life whom I have learned much from. They gave me so many gifts of knowledge, so many gifts of healing and inspiration. They revealed to me how the sentient world offers constant and highly personalized invitations to wisdom. It knows us, each and every one of us. The body of the world is the living fabric of the dream. The all is the vision of the Creator. And so in my teaching it is my joy and privilege to pass on the same invigoration and vision in the very best way I can. Sometimes it is harsh and acrid. Sometimes it is gentle and sweet. Every time wisdom flows into any of us, it is coloured and intoned with our intimate interior landscape, our own humanity and spirit, our scars and lamentations, our felicity and consonance. The wisdom calls to us and endows its transmutation to any soul courageous enough to face their own regeneration. The whole of life is a test of faith. Nothing unseen, nothing missing. Faith as experiential encounter. Faith in life's intrinsic and immanent teaching. The world delivers its fire into us, directly into mind and heart, written into the forehead and hand, emblazoned in our faith and works. Do you desire the exquisite and shattering intimacy known only through communion with another? Do you want to enfold your being into one who knows how to hold the fire? A life of unyielding truth is the only thing that brings this fearlessness. Moments expand outside of time. Fire in the blood. The clear waters reflect the heavenly host. Our path in this age is an individualistic one. Necessarily so. It is this way so as to contest and defeat the twin beasts of empire. Being you, uncompromisingly so, unashamedly so, spells disaster for the old adversary and the cursed earth. In the living witness of one's own lonesome learning, there is a great treasure, a seed of light, faith in self, faith in providence. It is here. It becomes known to us, just as we know the Son who abides with us every day, in love, in humbleness, in truth, shining above, purifying inside, inviting everywhere. And here, today, we all dwell together. Though one day, soon, we shall all leave together to go home.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Roamcast. Neil Kramer loves you. You heard clips from the following. Dialogue from High Plains Drifter, the 1973 film, directed by Clint Eastwood. The song, Wandering Mind, by Fascinating Earthbound Objects, from the album, E.E.L.A.H.O.O., shared under a Creative Commons, Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. If you liked any of those clips, support the artists and go buy their stuff. That's all for now. See you again soon. Until then, we wish you a beautiful day.